Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here for our Cell and Gene Live. As Miles said, I'm Erin Harris, and I'm delighted to have joining us our expert panelists for today. They are Will Junker, former head of quality engineering and head of vector quality at Kite, and Nicholas Siciliano, PhD. He's the CEO and co-founder of Vittoria Biotherapeutics. And I'd also like to thank Invitech for partnering with us on this presentation. We have an extremely informative presentation lined up for you, but before we begin, I'd like to remind you and encourage you to submit your questions for our panelists via the Q&A tool. We love hearing from you, and we want to help you and your team with the tough questions you're grappling with. So please submit them as you think of them, and we will get to them kind of later on in this presentation. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Will, I'd like to please start with you. Now, Nick and I are coming to you from the greater Philadelphia area, and Will is just down the road in Seoul, Korea. So Will's on a different, he's at a very different time slot here. But I'd like to level set the conversation at the start of all of our Cell and Gene Lives. And anyone who has taken the time to research Will and his background knows he's a quality expert. So Will, as we sit here today, talk us through briefly, kind of the current state of cell therapy manufacturing from an innovation standpoint.
Yeah. Reaching back a little bit into 2017 when I joined Kite, I didn't have a clue about cell therapy, manufacturing, research, the whole science, and I had to learn all that in my time with Kite. Pretty much didn't have any time for that, meaning I started to run quality engineering and started to design facilities. I had a crash course in how to do this, had a crash course in science, and worked with a whole bunch of thought leaders in this space on getting up to speed. So having seen that, having been playing a role around how cell therapy is commercialized, we launched the first product, we got acquired by Gilead Sciences, and we went commercial full scale, grew immensely immediately, built 4 new facilities, and then developed out of that capacity, developed the market. That was certainly an adventure and a great thing to do. It's still a new industry. Cell therapy is still like a fledgling, I want to call it, compared to monoclonal antibodies or general pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceuticals beyond that. There is new science and new opportunities coming up right now. We are approaching a lot of breakpoints, if you want, in this industry's trajectory into forking off into different areas. I'm talking about specifically autologous cell therapy is still predominant right now, but allogeneic is hopefully budding into the market more and more in the next couple of years. The market is still empty. The number of competitors on the commercial end are still, very few. And what needs to happen is there needs to be a lot more clinical success, coming out of phase 2, doing pivotal or going into phase 3 and really commercializing some of these modalities. And, with that, it is going to become more and more, or closer and closer, if you want, to mainstream on a much steeper curve than what we have seen with monoclonal antibodies. At this point in time, I don't think that the hype associated with the success of cell therapy is deflating, if you want. But it needs a lot more doubling down in this industry with new options for patients.
Yeah, sure, and that makes a lot of sense. We echo and hear that sentiment quite a bit on Cell and Gene, so thank you for that perspective. Nick, I'd like to hear from you, based on your expertise both in the industry and at Vittoria, what would you say is still lacking or needed when it comes to cell therapy manufacturing?
Sure. So thanks, Erin. Like Will, I've had a bit of a crash course in cell therapy manufacturing since launching Vittoria back in 2021. And I agree with, with what Will just said. I mean, it's relatively early days here, especially when you think about the commercialization of these therapies, because a lot of even, with the 6 approved products that we have today, it was the 6 approved CAR T products, a lot of the manufacturing processes associated with them were really kind of grandfathered, out of academia, which did a lot of borrowing from, legacy transplantation technology, stem cell transplantation, et cetera. So if you think about, just the commercialization process and, improvements in manufacturing associated with, new modalities, new products, et cetera. I mean, this is, really early days for cell therapy manufacturing. And I think you're just starting to see, over the last couple of years, the wave of investment in new manufacturing technologies, new automation technologies. And I think some of the, elements that, where there's a tremendous amount of room for improvement are obviously automation, streamlining the manufacturing processes, making sure that they're more robust, that they're more uniform. Many of the processes are still very manual. What we have seen, I think, is the specific unit operations, whether that be cell purification, et cetera, are, relatively automated. But linking those unit operations together to create a full process, I think is still a bit of a challenge. And that's where we're starting to see technologies that are working to do that. And again, I think one of the inherent challenges is for these products, once you make a change to the process, if even moving to some of these platforms, I mean, that creates a lot of regulatory work and going back to the agency, making sure some of this new equipment, has kind of passed muster with the agency. So those are some of the challenges and bottlenecks, I think, in seeing some of these new technologies kind of come to life in the space. But there's a tremendous amount of work being done there, and I'm confident that we're kind of on the cusp now of seeing those processes adopt some of these new equipment and technologies. But vein to vein time and speed of manufacturing, I think, is going to be an important element, particularly for autologous cell therapies. The manufacturing process for autologous versus allogeneic is just very different inherently, and I think there's different goals associated with those. But obviously for autologous, vein to vein time, will continue to be a driving factor. Not to mention, one thing that, we always talk about manufacturing, but one of the important pieces that goes hands in hand with manufacturing is the analytics and the analytical results needed. So if you're unable, so when you think about, for instance, vein to vein time and the speed of manufacturing, if you're unable to link that with, analytical results, then, at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference how fast you can manufacture because you still have the bottleneck of waiting for the analytics to come back. So I think the real step forward for the industry will be pairing some of the speed of analytics and time to results, at least required for conditional release of these products, at least as it relates to autologous cell therapies, to kind of match the manufacturing speeds. And, that'll involve a lot of collaboration with the agency and kind of proving out those methodologies and associated manufacturing methods. And I think another piece, that's going to be important, again, is linking some of these unit operations and closing down the systems to reduce microbial contamination risk. And we're starting to see some of these new automated technologies, again, working on doing that. But again, I think the key will be figuring out a way to loop in real-time analytics.